Special Weather Authority storm coverage is sponsored by Casco Bay Generators.
Welcome back. I'm Greg Lagerquist. Thanks for joining us here on the web for our special continuing coverage of what was Hurricane Lee. That storm now a post-tropical cyclone over the Canadian Maritimes. They took a direct hit. The storm has brought powerful winds and rain, though, to parts of Maine, too, especially the mid-coast east. Right now, Central Maine Power still reporting about 56,000 plus outages. Versant reporting almost 34,000 without power, so pretty wide-ranging impacts. Now, the Maine Emergency Management Agency updating the state of the storm right now. This is happening in Augusta. Let's go ahead and listen in to the briefing happening now at the MEMA headquarters in Augusta.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Pete Rogers, Director of the Maine Emergency Management Agency. Our state EOC remains in full activation for Post-Tropical Cyclone Lee. The biggest change in the storm since this morning is that the storm track took a hard turn east and is projected to head up to the Bay of Fundy. The statewide power outage number currently stands, and I say this a little bit flexible because it's been changing off and on all day, and that'll be talked about later, is at roughly 94,000. Some power restoration efforts are currently on hold due to bucket trucks operating within high winds. Therefore, outages may increase before the winds subside and crews can get back to restoring power. There are 6 incident-related road closures requiring tree debris cleanup. These are temporary closures, and I'm hearing that some are opened back up. The heaviest rainfall is focused over eastern Maine. Some localized sites were expected to receive up to 5 or 6 inches. Once the storm passes and folks get out to travel, please be mindful of possible debris in the road. Strong winds can cause debris from vegetation, buildings, and trash to blow into the roadway, creating hazards. Drive cautiously as you venture out. Steer clear of any flooded roads. For beachgoers, storm surge is often the main cause of hurricane-related deaths. It is not safe to head to coastal areas due to this surf. Hurricanes are not just a coastal problem. As we're seeing with the power outages, flooding can occur inland without warning, even days after the storm has passed. It's important to know your evacuation zone and to stay tuned to alerts and warnings through your local news station and your smartphone. Again, as I stated this morning, a sincere thank you to citizens who have prepared in advance for this storm and are taking it seriously. We appreciate your patience during these power restoration efforts. The crews are doing great work. We'll keep you up to date on any pertinent information. You can find preparedness and safety information on our website and social media pages. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Judy Long, Communications Manager for Versant Power. I have just come here today from Eastern Maine, where I can tell you that winds and rain are still a strong concern for us at the power company. We had to pull our crews down for a period of time from doing work in buckets, as was mentioned earlier, because of the strength of the winds. The safety of our crews is paramount, and the first thing that we want to make sure of is that we keep them safe while quickly and restoring power to people around our northern and eastern Maine territory. Since then, however, we have been pleased that the winds have subsided and we have been allowing workers to get back up in the bucket trucks. And they are certainly performing damage assessment and doing work from the ground when it is not safe for them to fly in the buckets. We have seen over 33,000 outages in Versant Power service territory this morning. Some of that has been in Penobscot County. The brunt of it has been in Washington and Hancock counties, however, as well as our island communities. So we will be working to first assess damage and make sure that people are safe. Public safety is front of mind. We have heard from our customer contact center that people are not always heeding warnings to avoid down lines and to avoid trees that have fallen on lines. We cannot emphasize enough that it is so important that if you have a tree on a power line, that you make sure to call Versant Power and have us assist you and any tree crews that you bring in to cut that tree off that line. There's no way to tell if a line is still active. So I know that you hear that quite often from the power companies, but it cannot be said enough. the last thing we want during one of these storms is to see someone lose their life trying to clear the way for traffic or trying to get out of their driveway. So please be cautious and make sure to call and report in that to us. We have our phone lines open 207-973-2000. You can also go directly to our outage map by Googling Versant Power outage map or going from our main page. We have some very detailed information there, as I'm sure other utilities do in Maine, about restoration. At this point, we are hopeful we will have all outages resolved within the next 72 hours. And that, of course, depends on when the winds end at these speeds. But we do have more than 100 crews working, as well as all the support staff that's needed to support them. And that includes our damage assessors, the logistics folks, the people in our stockroom, making sure that we have equipment where we need it, as well as all of those local customer service representatives answering the phone and trying to assist people. So I want to thank everyone for staying safe. As my predecessor mentioned, we certainly appreciate people that take steps to prepare for emergencies ahead of time, but we know that power is an inconvenience at worst when you don't have it. And so we're working very hard, again, with more than 500 people at Versant Power to get everyone back online in northern and eastern Maine, where we have seen some pretty significant damage, but looking to make sure that we safely restore service to our neighbors as quickly as possible.
We'll take questions at this time.
Judy, actually, if I could ask you quickly before we go to Peter, was there anything this morning as somebody was in that hard-hit area of Maine, or just anything that really stuck out to you as far as what you saw as far as the impact of the storm?
Well, what was unique about this storm, and I think we've been talking about this for a few days, as expected, we did see quite a lot of debris in the roads, a lot of trees down in roads with the saturated soils, with the degree of winds that we saw. There definitely was down trees, down limbs, down lines. So that's been notable, particularly in eastern Maine portion of our service territory. We're thankful that northern Maine at this time has largely escaped any of this weather, and thus they haven't really seen much damage up there. But we definitely in Washington and Hancock counties are seeing the impacts of that strong wind from this very serious storm.
John, could I actually ask you a question? Judy highlighted that there was a point today where the winds were so strong they couldn't use their bucket trucks. Was that something you were seeing anywhere across the state in the area that you guys cover?
So coastally, we've seen winds incredibly high, 40, 50, 60 mile per hour gusts. Our policy with our crews is 35 miles is the max wind speeds before we can put a bucket up. So we have had to wait in some areas before we could put those crews to work to restore power. We have been keeping up with outages, though. In total, we've seen around 100,000 customers lose power. Currently, only about 55,000 are out. So as we've been restoring power in southern Maine, we're collapsing crews to the harder hit areas from Brunswick up to Belfast to get those customers back online quickly.
Judy mentioned that they're hoping Versant Power customers will have their power back in the next 72 hours. Is there anything CMP customers can hope for?
We're working on, we expect this to be a multi-day event. We'll be looking at Monday. That could extend into Tuesday. But right now we're making every effort to get power back on because we understand there are consequences beyond just sitting in the dark. There are economic consequences. There are costs associated with that. So we're going to do everything we can to get our customers back online as quickly as possible.
My question is for Pete. Pete, how much of the storm has passed and what should people expect still?
It's interesting. As I mentioned this morning, the track is what people were focusing on throughout the week. They were looking at the hurricane track. Again, this wind field is so big. It is a very large storm. There are still impacts going on now. Certainly eastern Maine is experiencing heavy winds, surf, downed wires, outages. As you pull further to the west, they're still also experiencing heavy winds, surf. I saw some footage this morning, a bit ago, and it is still absolutely pounding down there, and the wind is still blowing. It is starting to subside, and it's starting to come down. The good thing for western Maine and part of the coastal Maine is the rain that was expected didn't really surface like they thought it was going to. So a lot of those hard hit areas from the past number of storms where there are other disaster declarations did not get that rain, which is very good news for those folks. They've had enough for a while.
And Pete, in terms of infrastructure damage, clearly we're seeing trees and power lines. Are you all seeing any other infrastructure damage necessarily beyond that?
We have not had any calls up yet. We have not heard from damages other than at this point trees down, limbs down, debris on road. We haven't heard about any damages to seawalls, for instance, or any of the culverts washed out. Now, that's not to say that hasn't come in yet, but it is out there. So we expect that we'll start to hear more and more if there are those damages very soon.
What do the next few days look like for MEMA in some of these harder hit areas?
So as you know, we go through the whole process. We start the storm preparation, we do the response, we work with the recovery folks, and then we work with our friends at FEMA if it looks like we're going to have enough damage to call in a disaster declaration, which we've had an awful lot of them this year. Thank you, FEMA. So we'll be working through this. Our recovery team's going to be busy working with the towns. We're going to be connecting continuously with our county directors and the locals to find out if those damages have surfaced, and then we'll continue to work with those folks to get them back whole.
Just a general question. I mean, you just alluded to it. This has been a hard-hit summer for a lot of communities in Maine. You guys have been very busy. As we sort of reach the end of summer here, what does this storm feel to you as sort of an impact from everything else that we've seen?
Well, it's interesting. The day that I was sworn in, we had our first COVID case. And after that, we've had shark attacks, we've had landslides in Westbrook, we've had earthquakes, we've had blizzards, we've had all kinds of things. So, to see a hurricane come through, I'm not surprised. I think that we were expecting that. It's been a while, so we are probably due. Certainly this has been quite an event. We have tracked it for a couple weeks now, right from the very beginning. So, we look at it and our staff looks at it like just a normal day. And it seems lately, with all the declarations, with all the damages, with all of these storms, that this is the new norm and we're getting used to doing this.
Are the call volumes here just as expected, and what are the trends you're hearing?
The call volume is high. The email traffic is amazingly high. We hear from a lot of different people. We have our folks in the public information office who are taking calls. They're looking at social media. They're answering questions from reporters. So it's very high. The folks are very busy. Everybody's fully engaged.
Pete, can you just talk a little bit more about flooding? I know you mentioned it earlier, but can you just expand? I had seen some folks saying flooding wasn't necessarily as bad earlier today. I guess, what do you see going forward in terms of flooding?
Well, we're definitely not off the hook at this point. There's still an awful lot of rain coming into eastern Maine. Those bands we've been looking at are continuing to roll through and will for the next number of hours, probably into tomorrow. I'm encouraged to see in western Maine, it looks like there are some spotty rain showers here and there, but it does not look like they'll have flooding over there. Great.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you for your time.
Thanks very much. Nice to see everybody.
Good to see you as well.
You have been watching a live update from the Maine Emergency Management Agency up in Augusta. Pete Rogers, the head of that agency, speaking most of the time there. Things that stand out, obviously, the fact that, as expected, most of the damage, most of the reports, most of the concern, far down East Maine. And especially right now, pretty much everywhere else, it's winding down a bit. Down East Maine, though, still very much a storm. The other thing that stands out, perhaps, and maybe this caught your ear as well, we heard from both of the power companies. Judy Long from Versant was saying, obviously, they're working hard on those outages. For them, they have about 30-some thousand. CMP reporting about 55,000. But we didn't get a timeline from CMP. We did from Versant. They say they're hopeful to have everyone's power back within 72 hours. So for them, this is going to be several days. before they feel like they're going to have everybody's power back online. We'll continue to monitor that. As expected, though, infrastructure damage other than damage to the power grid, not a lot of damage, just some blocked roads from those trees. Still monitoring that, but again, good news here, especially from what we thought maybe might happen a couple of days ago. Widespread infrastructure damage, possibly from flooding, localized flooding, maybe some seawalls being in danger, especially down east. Not hearing that today, folks. That's good news. We'll continue to have live updates for you here on CBS 13 and online here at WGME.com and, of course, on our social media channels as well. In the meantime, I'm Greg Lagerquist. For all of us here at CBS 13, thanks for watching. We'll be with you throughout the storm. We'll be back later.